It's Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. For all your news on politics, business, and education, it's FloridaDaily.com. Now, here's your host, Ed Dean.
Welcome to another edition of Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. I'm your host, publisher Ed Dean. Along with us again today, editor Kevin Derby and Claire Goforth, the political reporter for the dailydot.com. You can also hear her on NPR radio stations. Let's get to it. Some of the biggest news out there going on right now is the Teachers Unions Association, the largest one here in the state of Florida, is suing Governor Ron DeSantis. They're telling everybody, we don't think it's safe enough to go back to the schools. Here's a clip.
Florida's largest teachers union is suing Governor DeSantis and the Education Department over the state's emergency order to reopen classrooms 5 days a week. Attorneys for the Florida Education Association call the order reckless, unreasonable, and unconstitutional.
Claire Goforth, first off, kids got to get back to school. They got to know what's going on. Many of these school districts throughout the state don't seem to be on board with the Teachers Unions Association. You've got many Central Florida, South Florida districts might be a little bit late, but some are saying we could do it around August the 10th. You've got other districts looking at August 23rd. It's within the same parameters. Why does this lawsuit need to go forward?
Well, I mean, they're really trying to protect the teachers here. Teachers are going back into classrooms without really masks, without social distancing. They're afraid they're going to get sick. They're going to get their family sick. On the other hand, we've got kids who are sitting at home who some are going hungry, unfortunately. Some are experiencing some really terrible things in their home lives. And so, I mean, like, a lot of people want the kids to go back to school so they don't lose the ability to keep up with their peers around the country. But at the same time, if you're a teacher, you're a janitor, you're a principal, are you really going to want to go back into a classroom surrounded by, 30 kids day after day after day when you could be coming home with a deadly disease?
But Kevin, so how is it that a lot of other school districts are ready to go? We talked about this on one of our other TV shows. They have sat back and said, because the governor has already allocated $1 billion for school safety, for PPE, a lot of measures out there as well. What do you think this lawsuit's going?
Well, I think it's definitely going to go to the courts for a while. We'll see where it goes. I think a large part depends on where the pandemic goes from here. Are we at the peak? Are there going to be more cases? Will we be able to open up in 6 weeks? And look, we are starting to see more and more school districts start talking about, well, maybe August 31st. Let's also be very clear, though. There is a political component here in play. Look, the teachers' unions are the bread and butter. They are the shock troopers, if you will, of the Florida Democratic Party. Whatever happens, the teachers' unions will always be there thick and thin for Florida Democrats, especially in those three big counties in the southeast part of the state. So, yeah, I think that's also part of it here. Ron DeSantis' numbers are starting to crash, and people are starting to wonder, are their kids safe? And look, without those family voters, without a lot of suburban mothers, who, if they're worried about their kids, those are voters Donald Trump needs in 2020, and Ron DeSantis is going to need them in 2022.
According to the provisions put out by the DeSantis administration and by the Florida Department of Education, they've sat back and said, okay, we just need to have some brick and mortar. A lot of schools have sat back, Claire, and say, hey, we're not going to be open 5 days a week. I think, as we said this the other day on one of our other TV shows, why not promote more, which a lot of the unions are in favor of, believe it or not. Let's do more online education.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We get people around each other. We know we're going to spread this virus. And we're looking at the numbers go up and up and up in Jacksonville and other parts of the state. Online learning, though, it's not as good. Let's just be honest about that.
The teachers' unions all are behind it right now in the state of Florida.
Ask the parents. I mean, I got a lot of friends with kids, and it has been a nightmare for them. Not only do they have to do their jobs from home, but now they also have to try to basically teach their kids from home, so they're doing two jobs. And meanwhile, what FSU, I don't know if they backed off of that, but they said that you weren't allowed to work your job and also do your childcare at the same time from home.
If the colleges in the state of Florida can go online, why can't the high schoolers do it, or the middle schoolers?
I mean, high schoolers is one thing, but kindergartners? I mean, what? You're going to do like finger painting, I guess?
All right, so let me play to you a clip. Kevin, this is Randy Weigarten. She is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, the nation's largest union. This is what she said about online education.
But the real issue is we know kids have lost out by being home. We know remote learning hasn't worked. And with all of the cuts, you see a lot of school districts that are immobilized.
I don't know what cuts she's talking about. They're getting a lot of money. Here's the thing, is that we have a story out this week at FloridaDaily.com where it shows that even the unions are not in the same accordance. The Florida teachers unions have said that they support hybrid instruction, which is a part of alternative learning online courses out there. We've talked about where teachers have said, for example, in St. Johns County and a lot of district surveys, Robert Runcie from Broward County said, we're going online all the way. Evidently, this must be working with some people out there.
Yeah, and look, online learning is very specific. It is not for everyone. I absolutely agree with Claire. I don't think it works that well for K-6. I do think for high schoolers, it works a lot better. But look, let's be very candid here. Randy Weingarten's protecting her constituency, which is the big teachers unions, and that's who she represents. Yeah, they absolutely don't want to see school choice options. Having said that, though, let's play the other side, though. The White House and Betty DeVos all of a sudden going on Twitter, online learning isn't working. They want to get people back in schools. I think both the White House and Weingarten, the AFT, are kind of undermining their own causes here. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with what Kevin said. The Wall Street Journal came out with a scathing article going, wait a second, you're supposed to be looking out for teachers. Teachers are ready to get back. They're ready to earn money. I think that if you wanted to sit back, Claire, and say, okay, let me compromise. So you sit back and go, South Florida where the pandemic is the worst. Maybe they need to reopen possibly after maybe Labor Day. You've got counties, Walton County and the Panhandle and all these other ones. Hamilton County, they don't have the pandemic of a virus outbreak like many other communities do. Why not let them decide instead of having a statewide lawsuit put out there by the teachers union?
Right, but didn't the governor just basically say that all the schools need to go back? I mean, isn't the teachers union trying to fight against that very mandate
Schools
that
can
requires
go back,
everybody to do the same thing?
But the decisions could and possibly should be left to the teachers, local teachers, and the school principals
and the administrations. Yeah, I mean, like that does seem like the best way to do this. So let's take it to the local level and let each community make up their own mind about what's going on, what the situation is. I mean, South Florida, where the cases are super high, maybe they do need to go back later. And other parts of the state where they're low, maybe they're ready to go back. I mean, there's a benefit to kids being in school.
I agree with you. But Kevin, Frederick Ingram, the Teachers Association president here in the state of Florida, said he told David Asman from Fox News that they want to wait to the percentages. He didn't say percentages. He wanted to wait till the COVID cases would go down. The question is that when the schools were already deciding to reopen back in May and June, we've always had cases of increase in COVID. Now, follow me for a second. COVID cases have always gone up. If you wanted to talk about based on the percentages, like, for example, it was a 2% increase in May to early June, then they jacked up to 14, some days up to 15, then they went back down to 11. The cases are always increasing, Kevin. The bottom line is what are they looking at? Were there no cases increasing, period? Or they want to go 14 days with the CDC where there's nothing happening whatsoever? How are they going to decide this on?
Well, I think that, like everyone else, they're sticking their finger in the wind and seeing which way it's blowing.
Correct.
And that's the thing. There are so many moving factors, and this is an unprecedented situation. I do think there's room for flexibility here, though. Yes, the governor basically, and Richard Corcoran, the education commissioner, said we want brick and mortar campuses open 5 days a week. All of a sudden, Ron DeSantis starts walking that back, saying, well, that's the education department. I think if things continue to get worse, if things continue to stay bad in Florida, I wouldn't be surprised if DeSantis changes that decision.
You mean with the schools?
Absolutely.
What about high school sports? I mean, this is, this is a big thing in the state of Florida. Parents are all ticked off about this now, that they may not have it whatsoever. We've got NFL football saying that they're not going to have any preseason games. College football. I mean, this is a thing where this is almost like a lockdown, which we're going to talk about, if not today, tomorrow. This is almost like this is getting to be, because this is a loss of revenue for a lot of school booster clubs, even for some of the colleges out there. If the worst thing that I would think for football isn't COVID, is more about getting a concussion out there. Is it one of these where, hey, listen, they're young people, and a lot of them may be asymptomatic. If they pass it on, they may pass it on to those are college kids that may be asymptomatic. Should we not maybe balance it out and maybe kind of slowly start back opening some of the high school sports?
Man, I mean, that is another one there. I mean, yes, there's a lot of benefit to high school sports, but what are we going to say when a kid dies from COVID because they went back to school, or their parent died, or their grandparents die? I mean, this is just reality. That's what's going to happen. We bring the kids back into school. We're going to see this disease
Are you prepared
increase.
to lock down the schools when the flu epidemic kicks out again? 198 kids nationwide compared to 30, according to the numbers, CDC numbers. 198 kids have died from the flu. Are you prepared to shut that down, the schools?
You're right. I mean, that's definitely a good point. We're always talking about a balance of risks here, but we know that this virus is incredibly contagious. There is no vaccine for it. Treatments are kind of sort of starting to emerge.
What about
We're
face
starting
masks?
to get an idea for it. Yeah, they do work, and people should wear them.
So why don't we just face mask all the kids?
Yeah, I mean, good luck getting a pack of 7-year-olds to all wear face masks.
Who's going to win this issue, Kevin? Is this one, you say the longer it goes out, the worse it gets for Governor DeSantis, if the spikes do go up even further into August? Or what's going to happen with the unions? Are they going to cater into the demands by that of the Florida Department of Education? Who's going to win right now? What's your crystal eight ball say?
I think it just depends really if they can get a lockdown on the pandemic. If it continues to grow, I mean, it's anyone's guess. If they can get it under control, if they can limit it, they can reduce it, then yeah, I think Corcoran and DeSantis will be able to get what they want, get schools reopened. But that's, at this point in time, that's still, 5-6 weeks out. I mean, that's I'm not willing to put money on that bet.
Yeah, here's the bottom line. I think the teachers' unions, I think some of the experts out there would say they're extorting the school districts. They're talking about school safety. $1 billion has already been allocated from the state. We've got another $13.5 that's already been allocated by Congress. We're told we need $1.2 for every school in the state of Florida, $2,300 per student out there. Next thing you know, it could be $150. I mean, how much more do you need? Or is what we hear should be based on science? If the amount of children that catch COVID and get ill versus the flu, are we not? It seems like we're all over the map on all many sorts of issues.
Yeah, but Ed, it's not just about the kids. It's also about the communities they live in. I mean, they don't just go to school in this little box and then they leave and the virus sort of stays there. They're going to take it home with them. They're going to take it to the park with them. They're going to take it to the grocery store with them. They're going to infect the rest of us. And I mean, if we're willing to make that calculus where we say, okay, these people are going to die, that's going to be cool.
Then what would you decide?
And what about sick kids, like kids with immunodiseases?
What would you think? How do you decide of when the schools should be reopened?
I know. I mean, I'm glad I'm not in that position because I think that they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. You got kids that are hungry, kids that are suffering, that need to be back in school. They're falling behind with the rest of their peers around the nation. You got teachers who are concerned about their safety. I mean, and how much of that money you're talking about, that $1 million, is going to the teachers and the staff who are putting their lives at risk to do this? I mean, it's great for the school to be able to create these, distance learning or whatever the heck they're doing. But, if I'm not getting paid a little bit more of hazard pay, how comfortable am I going to feel going back to a classroom? And if we don't figure this out, we're going to be looking at a strike.
All right, let's talk about another issue. Let's talk about some campaign politics. It's now late July. We're going into the month of August. And what is the motivation? There's nothing really, as they say, politically sexy going on statewide, Kevin. The biggest thing we have in the state coming out, of course, besides the presidential election, there is no Senate seats up. There is no statewide office seats up. But you got a few constitutional measures. If I may just touch upon this, you've got and I know we're going to talk more about this over the next couple of weeks, is you've got everybody, the all-Florida primaries, where everybody can vote in the primaries. You've got the minimum wage debate coming up. But this has been a very under-the-radar issue. Kevin, when are these issues? Is everything going to pick up after Labor Day?
You would think so, but in this year of COVID and the recession and Black Lives Matter and other protests, I think that's impossible to say. Look, the presidential race has absolutely swallowed everything whole, whether it's congressional races. I mean, we are a month until the congressional primaries. Very little, you're hearing very little about it. We are a month till state Senate and state House primaries. You're hearing very little about it. The presidential race, the pandemic, and the protests have absolutely swallowed everything else whole. I think you'll see a little bit after Labor Day, but even that, I mean, questions about raising the minimum wage, the other constitutional amendments, they're all going to be eclipsed by the presidential race. And look, 9 months ago, maybe this wouldn't have been the case. A lot of people on the Trump team were thinking Florida's in the bag. Well, I think it's always fair to say Florida is never in the bag.
Let's talk about the RNC convention.
It's up for grabs in November.
It has become a cluster mess. You got a Republican governor who actually came out and said, hey, we got other areas. We got Orlando and Miami. It makes you wonder if he was really all in on the city of Jacksonville. Now the Republican sheriff, Mike Williams, out of the city of Jacksonville, came out and says, hey, after so many days, after a month and a half now, we don't think we have enough when it comes to security. Then we find out that the mayor, Republican Mayor Lenny Curry, knew about this all of the time. So, Claire, is this going to be kind of squandered down to, instead of 4 days, down to maybe 2 days? Or is it still possible we may not see an RNC convention in Jacksonville?
I know, that's a big question. Are they actually going to still have it? I mean, I do think that the president is absolutely committed to having that big moment of his where he takes the nomination, he gets his, everybody loving him and clapping because he just loves that. He feeds off of it. But, the city of Jacksonville is quite frankly freaking out about that RNC coming here. I mean, St. Johns County just says they delayed their school opening because of it, which is to the south of Jacksonville. I mean, this is a big deal when we're in the middle of a pandemic to bring thousands of people all together.
Kevin, think about the optics. everybody and their brother, from Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and a lot of these are professionals. Let's be honest here. We're not talking one, maybe two. I'm literally thinking. You correct me if I'm wrong. There are literally going to be thousands of people protesting. Who knows what may happen? The economic benefit, depending on what you may think, the economic benefit could be from those going to the hotels or those cleaning up after what may happen with the protest. Is this, or how bad is the optics this year for the RNC convention?
Look, I think it's going to be bad, even though Jacksonville is a Republican town, okay? It's controlled by the GOP. Look, what it comes down to, the economic benefits, they were talking $100 million at first.
Right,
They're not
that didn't happen.
That's not happening. They're going to be nowhere near that. They were talking about, we need hotels. We're going to need cruise ships, like what they did in the Super Bowl 15 years ago. That's not happening. I think the economic benefits are weak. I think you'll see a lot of protesters. And yeah, look, at the end of the day, you're looking at either a minor league baseball stadium, which isn't going to be filled with social distancing, and you're looking at maybe the football stadiums. If it sits 75,000, a lot of empty seats there. We saw how Trump flipped out about that in Tulsa. I think they'll do the same thing in Jacksonville. Either way, it's bad optics.
Yeah, I'm looking at the protest that's going to end up taking place. And I don't think the sheriff has enough. And the mayor came out from the city of Jacksonville. He says, well...
Yeah, they're shaking that money tree.
He says, I don't think we need any federal help. I almost sat back on my morning radio show, and I almost fell out of my chair going, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. So how's this going to look?
It's not going to look good. I mean, we've got this weird pissing match going on between DeSantis and Trump, and involving an operative who worked for both of them that he's mad about. So he's telling people not to give money to the host committee. And it's just like, it's a infighting mess on the Republican side. And then you're going to have all of these people come to Jacksonville from around the country during a pandemic and stand outside in the Florida sun in August, which, I'm sorry, every Floridian is just laughing right now because that is going to be miserable. It's going to be unpleasant for the people attending it, and it's going to be unpleasant for the city that's hosting it.
Kevin, you're a history buff. 1968, you've talked about this. People say that this was really bad for the Democratic Party. I'm not saying the Vietnam War wasn't bad enough to knock out, to put in Richard Nixon. Having said that, a lot of people talk about the optics of 1968. Right. If the optics look bad for the RNC, does that really contribute to a loss for Trump in November?
Well, look, I think a disastrous convention like what the Democrats had in 1968 and 1924, that hurts you somewhat. It doesn't hurt you as much as it did, though, in those election years. Conventions just are not as big of a deal as they used to be. They're made for TV events. I don't think it's going to really help or hurt anything when it comes to Trump. It's not going to be what knocks him out if he goes down. I think there's enough else going on. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't help him that much either. It doesn't really move the needle.
All right.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we'll want to see where this all goes. So the FEA, I usually have back to this real quick before we end this segment here. Sure. I don't know yet. All I'm just saying is you got a lot of schools that are saying we're going to reopen, and then you've got the teachers union sitting back going, we don't want to reopen. I'm just saying there's just something that's not in agreement there, and I don't know why mainstream media is not picking this up. All right. This has been another edition of Florida Daily TV, brought to you by FloridaDaily.com. Editor Kevin Derby, NPR, and also political reporter for the Daily.com, Claire Goforth. We'll see you next time on Florida Daily TV.